the new Cities Skyline. It's here and it's going to be a big one. I'll be running you through how I decided on the outline of Cape Lomond's new downtown. We're going to be adding over 40,000 Sims to the city today, and we're going to be using both the new packs, the French and the German ones, to add a bit of historic development to the build. We'll have some road network considerations that we'll need to contemplate on to help manage the influx of new Sims to the city, and we'll be extending the rail network too. Not to mention, we have a ton of detailing to do as well. I did say it was going to be a big one. First up though, I'm going to run through the latest deals from our sponsor, Instant Gaming. By the time the video drops, Microsoft Flight Sim 2024 will be out, and you can get up to 30% off the standalone purchase price. If you prefer to try a game out on Game Pass along with 100 or so other games that you get with that, you can grab a 3-month subscription right now, and there's 40% off the ultimate subscription. There's a huge library of discounted games available, so have a click the link below, have a look, see if there's anything you like the look of. Obviously does help support the channel tremendously. Don't forget, we're still giving away a free game this month. The link for the giveaway will be available for you in the same place down below as well, and very good luck with that. Along with the expansion of the downtown today, I really do want to get back to expanding our suburbs, and there's a parcel of land here right at the edge of the development, or the edge of town really, that I want to build on. It's got pretty good transport links already, given that it's right beside the interchange, the dangerous one. If you guys have watched that one, if you've not, watch the channel, it's a pretty cool build. And there's a couple of railway lines as well, so I definitely want to get the suburbs hooked up to a little bit more connectivity and hook them into the rail network. There's some pretty good leisure, commercial and office in this area as well, so we might get some commuter traffic potentially coming out here too, which will make it nice and busy. It's right beside a big industrial park, or not an industrial park, an office park I should say rather, so I think it's a pretty good shout. So after clearing the area, we'll get rid of all the trees so we can see what we're working with. It was really just a matter of deciding how I wanted to play this one. So I decided that I'd get a rough positioning for the train station and then sort of build the road network around it. It makes it a little bit easier to plan, and then I can kind of figure out what I want to elevate and maybe what I want to drill down on in terms of what networks are going to go over where. So this is a notoriously flat map, and after drawing out a bit of a grid pattern here that I want to be building our low density residential on, I could see that there was a fair bit of terraforming done here previously when I was working on the big sports build. So for the main part I decided to pretty much leave the ground alone where we're going to be having the low residential buildings. I think a little bit of variation and those little dips in the ground actually look quite nice. For the train station, I thought I am going to raise this one up. I think it makes sense because of the dip in the ground already, and we should be able to kind of fit a bit of an underpass once we have it here as well. So I'm going to take the highest level where it connects on the road, and I'm just basically going to build it at that level for the station. Initially I thought about raising the elevation directly after crossing the main road. It looked a little bit too steep, I didn't like it, so I decided to just take it right the way back before the existing crossing and really just start an embankment from that point. Certainly in the UK where I'm from, embankments are pretty much the go-to with most of the rail stations, and I'm going to use my experience and what I'm used to and really just build on that. It will mean that I've got plenty of space to raise the elevation, and the elevation once it's in place, or the embankment rather once it's in place, should look pretty good actually. And we'll get that nice and detailed as we build along. So we'll have a fair bit of terraforming done to get this to blend into its new community. And I reckon on the other side, on the right hand side or the east side of the train station, I'm pretty happy with an at-grade crossing. I reckon it shouldn't be too bad in terms of traffic down at this neck of the woods, so we'll keep that. But again, we have options to maybe raise it or turn it below or whatever we want to do later on. But I'm going to keep it at the same level as the existing road for now. So once I got the train station connected to a basic one-way road, I just decided to make a single crossing underneath the railway. So we're going to cut through the embankment, and I'm going to create an extended grid, and really I want that whole parcel to be completely full of low-level residential. Now we do plan for this railway to have a bit of an overpass or a pedestrian walkway going over. I think that is expected, even though there is a walkway built in underneath this station. I think you would expect to see something going over it as well, even though that road does exist, of course, cutting through the embankment. So with the basic networks in place, let's just hook something up and make sure that it is working and it's functional. and it shouldn't take too long to do that. Now that road going up to the station looks pretty chunky, so I reckon I'll get the road builder out and try and finesse that a little bit and get something that looks a little bit more appropriate. Of course, we're just hooking things up at the time being, and we'll make sure it all works. In terms of zoning, you're going to see me just use a standard spawned in zoning. I'm not really going to be placing any buildings unless I really need to if the zoning is playing up. So nothing too fancy in terms of placement of the buildings. I just want it kind of looking uniform really, as you might expect, as if the development was all built at the same time. Now I do want to take just a quick minute and make sure everything on the train is connected, and it's just gone straight past the station, so I will need to I'll need to quickly redo this. I think this is gonna be a direct consumer route straight to our downtown, so yeah, we'll need to come back and get that redone. But it's pretty nice following the trains about though, isn't it? And we can have a quick look at the infrastructure here actually and what we have in place already, and yeah, we're gonna get cracking on with this downtown just shortly. So the road that I landed on with Road Builder was just a simple road, one-way road with paving on one side. So really all we need is access to the train station itself. We don't necessarily need anything else on the other side of the road. So I think it looks appropriate. I think it looks fairly slim, you know, and efficient, and that should do the job. And I am going to just drag them out. I would like to space it out and kind of make the development or the train station itself look that little bit bigger, you know. A little bit of quay wall I think is appropriate here for the raised station, and then we should be able to kind of mask up any of the ugliness at the back with a bit of vegetation later on. So from a detailing point of view, pretty straightforward, there's not a huge amount to it. And I think on the main side, you know, the other side where the platform looks that little bit bigger where it's been dragged out with Road Builder, we can add some props here and make it look a little bit nicer. But realistically it's a sort of neighbourhood or a suburban train station, and I don't think we need to spend a huge amount of time on the actual station itself. Now along the tracks I definitely want to add a little bit of interest along there, so I created a bit of a collage of stones, rubbles, boulders, a little bit of vegetation, and I'm just simply going to line them along the embankment basically. Control C coming to the rescue here, and then we can use move it and just drop them all down to the ground. Now of course, given that there is a change of elevation along here, it won't look perfect. You will see some gaps if you like where the boulders are sort of floating in the air, and we're just going to fill them up with a little bit of extra hand placed vegetation, and then some of the props to really fill those gaps. So shouldn't take too long. Obviously Control C definitely helps, and a little bit playing about with that and we should be able to get it looking nice and natural. I definitely want to make sure of course we don't have anything on the tracks. I want to keep them nice and clear, and then once we add some bigger trees, we should be able to blend it in and it will look pretty good. Now I do like to spend quite a bit of time, probably too much time, on the trees, and it always makes it look much more natural, doesn't it? I think also alongside the tracks themselves I do want to add a little bit of surface work, nothing too much, just some of these dirt ones, and really just break up any sort of plain looking surface that we have along the tracks themselves. Once we have all the trees in, I am going to obviously pepper the whole neighbourhood with them, plenty in people's backyards, plenty along the train station, and any sort of gaps that are there I do want to fill them up as well. So we'll get that in place and then we can have a quick look at how it turns out. So I'm happy now that we've got a little bit of a suburb expansion on the go. We hooked up that train station of course, and that comes right the way down to our downtown area. And swinging over down to the downtown area, the plan for down here really is fairly extensive, to be honest. I am going to create some new city centre districts. So the first of which is going to be the French inspired waterfront. Really at this point I just want to get the main buildings in. I just want to see if it works. It will be detailed later. I've got some plans along the waterfront. It'll probably be an episode of its own. There'll be quite a lot to do on that one, but I want to get the buildings in place first anyway, just to see, you know, how they look. I am going to create pretty much a brand new commercial area along this downtown as well, which we'll obviously get to. We have an older area, of course, on previous episodes, which is the kind of former warehouse kind of factories, and that sort of extends out of the industrial area that we have down by the port. So I'm going to extend that, probably going to extend that along the extended highway, and then I'm going to start on the central business district. So that's going to be big skyscrapers, big huge apartment buildings, and we're going to leave plenty of space for some plaza detailing as well. So plenty of potential on this one. As we go along, you'll probably see me just constantly checking on how the skyline is looking. I really want it looking balanced, I want it looking appropriate, I want the size to be what you would expect to see, you know, in a city this size. Now it's going to be a pretty big city, but I don't want to go overboard and just have mad skyscrapers everywhere, you know. Now you will see as I go along that some of the individual areas will be detailed, and most of that will be done just at the end of the episode. I won't be able to get everything done. Again, like the kind of French area alongside the central business district, I do have plans for a few bits and pieces that won't quite fit in this episode. This episode really is more about what you saw and what you clicked on. It's more about putting the skyline together and really getting a shape together that I'm happy with, and then I can build out and sort of expand on later on. But that said, if you're a detailing fan, don't worry, there is still plenty of that in this episode as well. So along the coast, I decided to start off with some medium-sized buildings, and I went for a couple of the schools and a police station, if I remember correctly. It fitted in really nicely. Of course, we have these really big white apartment buildings, and that was a design choice. I wanted pretty much everything the same colour, so it looked like it was the same development. And I kind of want to extend that theme, and of course the French packs, now that they're out, are perfect. And this is pretty much the first time I've had a look at them. I've had some things going on in real life that's kept me busy, and I've not really had too much time to get stuck into the game. So yeah, really nice to try these things out and see how they fit in. But perfect colour coding, at least anyway. I know we can't really recolour these things, but that worked out pretty well here, to be honest. So then, once we have those kind of medium-sized buildings in, again, I want to start bringing down the density a little bit as we hit towards the waterfront. So I'm going to use a combination of row homes and some of the commercial or mixed assets, I think it was. And I'm just going to have a couple of blocks, kind of big blocks if you like, along that main road, and it should look pretty nice. I think along the actual waterfront itself, we've got some extensive plaza potential as well. So as I said, I'll be getting stuck into that in another episode. This isn't the one for it, but I do have some ideas. I'm just not quite sure if, well, how I go about pulling it off, I'll be honest. So after creating a few blocks, we've kind of got the college in there as well. We've got a couple of the college buildings, and that is an absolute beaut of an asset. I think there's a ton of scenarios you can use that particular building for. So we've got a few other blocks in there as well, and that pretty much is the bulk of the French inspired waterfront, you know, that I want. As I said, I'm not going to detail a huge amount. I just want to get some trees in and a little bit of surface work, and I'm going to use some of the red brick stuff as well. And it's a really nice addition, these surfaces. It does add that little bit of colour and contrast to what would otherwise be a kind of boring parking space. Really looks really nice. Now you might see throughout this build that I am marking some areas that don't have any development on them. So where I'm planning on maybe a plaza or a park, I'm just going to mark something out with a path, and that's just going to make sure that I don't plop something on it by mistake later on. So the very first of the bigger buildings that I want to introduce to the build is going to be the start of a commercial area, a big shopping area. I want that nice and close to our transport hub, and want it nice and close to the big train station. That's really going to be the main sort of method of transport for getting about the city through the subway. And of course we have plenty of trams, and we've got plenty of bus capacity to be adding to this as well. So the idea here really is just to build up some blocks, and we'll use various different commercial assets. Not necessarily going to use the French or the German ones in this particular part of the city. I would like this to look a little bit more modern, so I am going to use just the base game assets, and we'll try and get some pretty decent variation in here as well. I'm not necessarily going to worry too much about different colours and whatnot. Recolouring can wait for another day, but again, I just need to get the skyline done, and that is what this episode is all about. We've got a ton of demand really on all fronts apart from office, and I'm going to satisfy the bars as much as I possibly can. We're going to be adding in a huge amount of new people, or huge amount of sims into the city, and really we want to make sure that I want to try and keep it as balanced as I can in terms of demand. Obviously I am plopping down everything by hand in this part of the city, which is completely different from the suburbs that you've just saw me work on. But for me, it's just nigh on impossible to get anything that looks sort of halfway decent, you know, with the way that the zoning works in this game in terms of a compact city centre. So this is how I'm going to approach it, and I think it works quite well. So although this is all high density commercial, it's probably more medium size, I guess, when it comes to building size, you know, for a modern city centre. And that's perfect. I think it's a decent transition from a really large open plaza area. I don't want to go straight to skyscrapers, although it won't be too long to walk to get to them. But I think having a good cluster of, you know, medium height city centre buildings will be a pretty good mix, and I think it's reasonably realistic and what you would probably expect most cities to really have the bulk of their built environment made up of. So as we get started on the central business district, you will see some buildings pop up and some of them will disappear. It's a little bit of trial and error. I haven't used a huge amount of these really tall buildings before, so it's really just a case of discovering what we have, what we can play about with, and what's going to look good in terms of orientation and its surrounding buildings. I'm really going to be using a fairly decent mix. I am conscious that I don't have any office demand, it's very much overzoned. It will take a bit of time for that to come back if it ever does, but for the time being I am still going to use the assets nonetheless anyway. If it's the best fit, then I'm going to use it, and mostly for this it's the Skyline. It's more about the aesthetic than anything else in this episode. I want the city to look good from every angle when you're coming in on highways and when you're coming in on the transit. I'm going to plop down a good mix of zonable assets, and I'm going to chuck in whatever signature assets I can find as well. I'll play about with the orientation of these. We'll spin some of them around, we'll keep some of them flat up against the road. Some will sit in the middle of the grid and some of them will just sit in the corner. So again, we'll chop it up and try and make it as interesting as possible. We should of course be able to hook several of the smaller assets together and make some really large blocks, which will look quite nice. I'll be able to use that technique to form some tall but longer buildings, and we'll introduce various different sizes. On some occasions I'll use some of the chunkier, maybe 6x6 commercial assets, and we'll just fill an entire block with the same asset, and that will look like one big shopping centre perhaps you'd find in a city centre. Now although the main consideration is of course the Skyline, and I wanted that to be looking good from every angle, I do also want it looking pretty good at ground level. So every now and again I'll jump down at street level and we'll have a little bit of a virtual tour and see how things are looking. Now, of course, the central business district is not going to get a huge amount of detail in this episode. As I said earlier, I do have plans for it, so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on that. It's more about the layout of these really big buildings, which will give us a base to build on. But certainly for the commercial area, that's going to be super busy with pedestrians, and as I zoom in or follow cars about the city, as I do want to enjoy the view, and I want it interesting at that level as well. To preempt some of the traffic that we're going to get, I thought I had maybe better spend a bit of time on the road. So what I decided to do was to introduce a partial one-way system into the main city grid here. As I said, it's not going to be perfect. We've got a lot going on in terms of different roads intersecting each other. We do of course have the railway to the west, which breaks up the grid, but where I can and where it makes sense, I think I will just make a few of these roads run on a one-way system, and we'll do that on the horizontal and the vertical roads as well. edge of our transport plaza, I want to fill up the little gaps here with some standalone buildings, so we're going to make a couple of mini blocks and it should fill the gap nicely. We've got plenty of park area, I think, so I think having some really smaller type buildings filling an unusual gap should look quite nice actually. I'm going to use a bit of a variation with these. We'll get different sort of sizes and I'd like it looking sort of nice and unique. Added this big commercial asset and I have to say it is really nice. I do like that. I might have more than one of these in the city by the time we're done. Now, as I was working out how to go about doing this episode, I was thinking perhaps maybe breaking it down into individual districts, but doing it that way I thought the rate of progress was just going to be a little bit too slow really, and doing one area and then detailing it, it's probably what most people might expect, but decided to sort of approach this a little bit different and really just try and get a big build in place, in one video, because these things do take absolutely forever. I have to admit, I definitely underestimated how long all of this would take. It does take an awful long time, but that said, where I can see some simple detailing opportunities, I will just take them. I'll go ahead if there's a park, for example, that needs to be extended, and I don't think it's going to take too long, then I'll just go ahead and do that. If there's maybe a simple bit of surface work just to, finish a block, then we may as well just get it done, The one thing I've noticed in this city is that there is an insatiable demand for ambulances and for death care for hearses. I thought, maybe should I just keep adding facilities? That's exactly what I did. I kind of got a nice medical in here behind the college, and the French crematorium is really nice. It's a real small asset. You can shoehorn that in various little places in and about the city, and it doesn't look too out of place at all. It's a really nice addition having different asset sizes like that. However, that said, no matter how many facilities that I added to the city, the icons stay there. You could have a building literally surrounded by hearses and they don't appear to pick them up. So I don't know if that's just an issue with the icon. The Sims aren't complaining about it. In the happiness thing, the healthcare coverage is good. So I reckon it's probably bugged, I'm guessing. Might be a mod that I'm using, but I don't really use too many that change the simulation itself. It's mostly visual mods and mods to help make things look a little bit more interesting. So on previous episodes, of course, we created a bit of a former warehouse area or a former factory, type area alongside our industry beside our downtown. And I'm going to extend that now with some of the beautiful French assets. And this one really is just a stunner, really, isn't it? It's absolutely exceptional. I think I read somewhere or saw somewhere that it took the creator 50 or 60 or 70 hours, to do. And you can see that, can't you? You can see the love and care put into that. It's absolutely phenomenal. So I talked previously about having older buildings that are used for cultural activities, and in this one I'm looking to try and do the same. So although we have that really fancy entrance, I do want to give it a bit of an old former industrial look, and I'm going to use the French pack substations. They work really well. I think if they're lined alongside what looks like maybe a former warehouse or a former market or fruit market or something like that. That's the kind of feel that I was going for here as well. So really I just want to extend the asset, and I very much want that to look like a landmark in the building or a landmark in the city that people would really visit, and you'll have some really major events in there. Behind that building, I'd like to give it something colourful, and that's exactly what I'll be doing. I'd like perhaps the building behind it to be connected to it somehow, and perhaps that's more of an administration building for some cultural events as well. I think it's a nice combination and a nice contrast actually between architectural styles. So I am going to use the old factory condos. We'll sling a few of these together, and of course that's perfect for this district. We've got some of the older sort of brick buildings with the signature buildings and the big city high school, or elementary school rather, as well. The vertical asset, which is a row home signature building, if I remember correctly, we're going to be using some of them, and I'm going to combine it with some other assets as well, and we'll bulk that out, and we'll fill that city square as well. But it should go well, and it's very much in line with what I want to achieve, and extend these sort of older brick style buildings along the elevated highway and beyond. So I can kind of imagine that this older district was partially bulldozed, to accommodate the elevated highway. I would imagine that there might have been some local opposition to that, but that is progress, as they say. We've seen this in the past in my own home city of Glasgow. The powers to be decided to demolish quite a lot of our old historic buildings to build a huge motorway through a city centre. Now, as a driver, I can't complain. It's super useful. The road network is pretty good, but it certainly does cause a divide between one part of the city and the other. And a lot of the old historic sandstone buildings are gone forever as well, which is a real shame. So I think perhaps we can draw some parallels here in Cape Lomond as well. Now, one little adjustment that I have been meaning to do for quite some time, and now's as good a time as any, was really just to shore up and tidy up the rail network that we have here as well. And not so much the actual rail tracks themselves, but really just the amount of space that's taken up with the sunken element or the trench that they run on. So I'm going to use Move It, and I'm going to play about with these key walls and really just tighten them up a little bit and try and make this space a little bit smaller and just a little bit tighter. It will mess up some of the bridge networks that we have, but that's okay. I'm going to be redeveloping these things a little bit later as we build out towards this part of the city as well. I don't love the elevated 6-lane road that we have here, and it's going to cause some issues later down the line where it comes off the park law and towards the tunnel. Now, not really an issue at this point because there's really very little traffic on that road, but it will be something that I'll be keeping an eye on, and definitely something that I'm going to have to rework later on. Down where our skyscrapers are, I want to really get a feel for what I'm going to do in terms of building out a plaza. The first thing that I'm going to do is find a location for this fountain plaza. Now, if you don't have this fountain plaza, you can get it for free. I'll leave the instructions in the description, but really all you need to do is just log into your Paradox account and claim it. I didn't know about it, so yeah, you can 100% get it. As I said, I'll leave description down below, and go get it yourself, guys. Now, I mentioned earlier on that I roughly want to go along the lines of commercial demand or demand for anything else, for that matter. One tool that will really help you with that is InfoLoom, and do check it out if you don't have it already. If you want to get a deep dive into what products your city needs and what products your city is producing, you can now get that from the extra tabs that has been added to the mod. Now, if you've been following the channel, I don't really go deep diving too much into that sort of thing. It's more about the aesthetics and the design in this city. But I find it really useful to see just exactly how far ahead or how far behind I am in certain demand aspects. And for that, it's pretty useful. So go check it out. So what I'm going to do at this point then is I'm just going to crack on, and I'm going to continue building out part of the commercial, and I'm going to continue building out part of the older part of the city as well along that highway edge. So I'll let that run for a minute and I'll catch up with you shortly. Now, one thing I definitely want to have in the city is to have a really tall landmark building. The obvious choice is the tower, the tourist one, and I did make a bit of space for that and plop that down just in the middle of where the taller buildings are. And really I want to kind of have that as a kind of focal point on the skyline. I did change my mind on that. I think generally speaking, they're in every single city, aren't they, do you know? And I want to try and make it look a little bit unique, so I'm going to place it down. I'm going to pick a spot for it, but I'm going to be ripping this out and I'm not going to be using it as the build progresses. I'm going to be removing it before this episode ends, in fact. I do have something else in mind, and it is a better fit, I reckon. Keeping an eye on our Sims happiness, I did see that they are complaining about the state of play with postal services. Now, I wasn't really planning on adding too much industrial or city services unless I really needed them, but along this part of the coast, along and underneath the big bridge and the interchange, I definitely want to extend industrial stuff and service stuff along there. I think it's pretty cool along the water, so I'm going to pop down the post office for now, but yeah, we'll probably extend that out a little bit later on. That's going to make a nice episode on its own as I build along there. I'll get plenty of the extensions in there. I think they look pretty nice. I should be able to make a little complex on its own, really, and we'll use up a couple of the smaller city blocks that we have in that particular area. Again, I'm not going to detail this just now. I will be coming back to it. I do have plans, and I do like making those little pockets of industry and service areas. Now, as we get to the edge of the CBD and a little bit more into the commercial area, and again towards the highway, I think it's going to be a pretty good spot to add a decent bit of parking, actually. So you would expect perhaps land values to be a little bit lower in that particular part of the city, and of course there's not a huge amount that you can build underneath a highway either, is there? So I think commercial parking options would be very much welcome in that part of the city. Now, in terms of traffic, I could see it was getting pretty busy, and realistically it's only going to get a bit busier as well. So I was having a little think about how I can maybe extend some of these arterial roads and perhaps how we can hook it up and give another highway connection as well. So what I decided to do is really just extend one out straight out towards our big turbine interchange. And what I'm going to do here is create something of, I'm not even quite sure what to call it, to be honest with you. I guess I'll just build it out and I'll show you, and maybe you guys can come up with a name and let me know what it's called. So for the traffic that needs to enter the actual interchange itself, I'm going to run a ramp over the highway itself, and I'm going to connect directly into one of the direct turns off the existing highway. We'll give it a bit of an extension in terms of the lanes. We'll give it 2 lanes, and we'll give it a little bit of a merging opportunity to hook into that part of the road. For traffic that wants to enter the interchange and go to any other direction of travel, then I'm going to be a little bit inventive here. I'm going to add an extra lane on 2 parts of the road, and I'm just going to give it its own specific flyover, and it can connect directly into the interchange itself, and from there you can either go straight on or you can go left. Now you can't right now, but you will in a minute once I sort out the connections on the other side of the interchange. There will be a short weaving section, and we'll need to keep an eye on that. That is a potential bottleneck where traffic's coming off the highway and on the highway, but we'll see about that one. I don't think there's going to be an awful lot on that section, but that is definitely something that we will be keeping an eye on closely. For the northbound traffic or westbound traffic, I'm going to create a fairly substantial ramp that's going to run alongside our big subway yard over there. We'll run it straight over everything else, and we'll hook it up with a big sweeping curve, and that should work quite nicely as well. Now I might come back at a later date with Road Builder and maybe just sort out the amount of lanes on there. We have an extra one running in off that loop, and it's not really necessary, but not a big deal if we keep it either. But we don't have asymmetric highway roads, and it could be a nice addition. I guess it's something a little bit unique, isn't it? Now I will clear off some of the vegetation, and we need to make sure that we do have enough clearance on these ramps as well. So a little adjustment here and there with Move It is all that's required, and we should be on to a winner with that one. Now for that traffic coming off the arterial and looking to turn left, we will need to create that connection. So on the other side of the highway, I'm just going to delete some of the existing ramps and we'll add an additional lane. It's as simple as that. So the circular element of the interchange, I'm going to upgrade that to a 2-lane. That will accommodate the extra traffic all the way around, and it should just be a case of connecting it into our highway at the bottom there, straight in, get the elevation sorted out with Move It, tidy up the ground a little bit, and if it doesn't go in too well, we'll just extend the highway to the 2-lane, and we should be able to get a good smooth connection coming off this one with a little bit of luck. And all that's left to do really is just connect that final ramp, and we have our merging lane in place already. And with that tidied up, we should have a complete service interchange now, able to go in any direction and come in from any direction. Lovely. Do like that. Nice little bit of spaghetti that we have here. We got a couple of interchanges, or 3 interchanges altogether, 2 services and 1 main system interchange, and they're all pretty much hooked up together, and I'm pretty happy with that. Looks pretty cool. Now, I did mention earlier on that the big tower that we have here in the city, I really didn't want to keep. It just looks like every other city that's large that has a downtown, doesn't it? You know, it kind of takes away the uniqueness of it. So what I decided to do was to grab this big, I think this is a big residential building, and what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and raise it up to a significantly higher elevation than anything else that's around, and I want this really to be the city's landmark building. Now clearly you can see as I'm doing this that it's pulling up the ground with it. Now I do want to keep everything functional if I can. I don't have the vanilla, building props assets installed here. I'm not going to be using them in this build, so our options are kind of limited in terms of how we go about doing it. But obviously what I need to do is I need to hide that ground, and the way that I'm going to do it is basically create a base for the road itself, and that base is going to be made from identical buildings, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shift them into place. It did take a little bit of adjusting with Cuboid's Move It to get this done, but really it's not too complicated. As long as there's road access to all of these buildings, they will continue to function as you would want. So we'll we'll have a little play about with that. We'll get that done. We'll try and make it look as symmetrical-ish as possible, but the main consideration is making sure that all of that ground is well hidden. So once I was happy that I had all of these in place, and sometimes you maybe just need to grab move it and move the road as well, just so things are still connected. There was still a little bit of ugliness down at the very ground floor, so what we'll be doing is we'll be revisiting this and we'll add some lower level commercial assets at the base, and we should be able to get all of this stuff tidied up without really too much effort. But yeah, I much prefer having that instead of the big tower in our city. I think that looks certainly an awful lot more unique than using the assets that come with it. Looks pretty cool. Happy with that. Now we can take a swing over and see how our subway station is getting on, and yeah, that's going to be super busy once we get all of the lines hooked up, isn't it, properly? So remember, a lot of these lines really, they don't go anywhere. Too busy, and they only have 1 or 2 stops. So once we start building out the city a bit more and really think carefully about how we're going to plan out the subway network, then that should be super busy. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. So I really want to keep building up to the big arterial road, and I'm going to start introducing a few more commercial or hotel assets along with our commercial ones. I think it's really important to try and get that in. I'm not entirely sure if that is still bugged or not. I'm not quite sure what the state of play is on that one, but I'm not too bothered. But at this point, most of the buildings are in place within our main sort of downtown core, and I'm going to continue to build that out, fill a few gaps, and I'm going to start doing a bit of detailing as well. Now, I'm not going to detail the whole area. It's beyond the scope of this particular video, but I'm going to get a fair chunk of it done, and I'm going to really work out from where we have the detailing done already, from previous episodes, and we'll get a fair chunk of it done. So if you think along the subway station, around the back of it, and along our sort of historic strip, if you like, along the highway as well. So we're going to fill it up with some vegetation. There is some nice park detailing opportunities that I'm going to do, and get some surface works done pretty much around the car parks, and we'll make them look like they are not abandoned, but particularly not maybe well looked after perhaps. So this will be a reasonable length time lapse. I'm going to leave it with you. Enjoy the music, and I will catch up with you in a minute or two. So much detailing, and so much detailing still left to be done as well. I think we've made tremendous progress here in this episode. I mean, 40,000 sims in one episode is a crazy influx of population, but still we've got coastline work to do. We need to detail the CBD, we've got industry and city services that I want to add near the highway interchange. We want to build out the transit that we've got there. We've got midtown transition to suburb, and that's just some of the stuff that I'll be building out from the downtown. Other parts of the city, I'm thinking build out a university, I want to flesh out the government area, and I really want to extend those suburbs at the edge of the map that you're looking at right now as well. Tons to do, lots to keep me busy. Hope you enjoyed this one, guys. Remember, if you want to help support the channel, do check out that instant gaming link. Patreon memberships are open, YouTube memberships are open, but most importantly, just watch the videos when they come out. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one, guys. Take care.